So very easy. My name is Laura, and today let's do a faux flanged binding, and let's do it all by machine. A flange binding is this tiny little peekaboo fabric that's tucked inside the binding. You have your binding and the flange, and this can all be done in one step right at the machine. This is just another way you can put binding on a finished quilt. Your quilt needs to be finished and squared up. For the binding, we need two different colors. One is going to be the flange, that small peekaboo fabric, and the other one is going to be the binding. And in this case, I'm going to do the gray binding, and my peekaboo flange is going to be this turquoise. The turquoise, or the flange, is going to be larger than this piece here, which is the binding. You will need to cut your flange at 2 inches, and the binding is going to be 1 3/8 of an inch. These combined will give us this flange binding. Both of these strips need to be the same size, and you need it to go all the way around your quilt, plus a little bit extra for your corners and for joining. So you'll need to join your strips just like you do your regular binding. So you will end up with 2 very long strips. When you join your strips together, make sure your strips are pressed and the seams are pressed open and flat. When your 2 long strips are done, place your strips together right side and stitch the entire 2 pieces together right along the seam at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When the 2 long strips are sewn together, you'll need to press the flange piece towards the binding piece. So the larger fabric is going towards the smaller. And do this for the entire long piece. When that's pressed, you're going to need one more pressing. You're going to take those 2 raw edges, match them up, and press. On one side, you're going to see the binding and the flange. The other side, you're going to see just the flange. This flange will be approximately a 1/4 inch. When the strips are all sewn together, we will have 2 ends. We need to have a starting end, and on that end, we're going to make a 45-degree cut. Start with the piece where the skinniest strip is going to be facing you, so the cut edge is to your left-hand side. This is going to give you the correct angle. You need to cut a 45-degree angle on this piece. Using a ruler with a 45-degree mark, cut from the smallest going up to the largest. Take this 45-degree cut and press under a 1/4 inch. And then fold it back and repress that top seam. When it's repressed, your edges still match. You have a 1/4 inch seam that's been pressed over. You have a little triangle here with 1 layer of fabric. This is the starting corner. You will be sewing this binding on the back of the quilt. So you're going to be able to match up those raw edges so the fold is coming into the body. The flange piece is facing the back. You can trim this little ear off. With those raw edges together, stitch a 1/4 inch. Continue stitching a 1/4 inch, and when you get to a 1/4 inch from that corner, you need to stop and come down into the angle. So this is the edge of the fabric. I've stopped a 1/4 inch up and I've stitched down into that corner. You can see on the front where I've stopped and I've come right off of that corner. I leave myself some thread to hold on to for the next stage. I'm going to take this edge and twist it so that it matches the top. So if we had an imaginary line, this edge is going to come up along this edge. So you fold it and push it up. And now that raw edge is matching the second side. It's important that you don't go up too much or leave a gap. You want that fold right along the edge and the raw edges matching up. Put it back in the machine and stitch a 1/4 inch. You're going to have a little bit of a hump to come over, and that's where this thread's going to come in handy, because you're going to be able to take that thread and just hold it as you come over that lump. When you've stitched down, you have this little flap secured. You will need to do this to all 4 corners. When you get to the area that you started, you get to end it. You don't have to do any folding or anything special. I'm going to use this empty space here as a cutting line. Stop to give yourself just a little bit to work with. We will need to cut this end off, and the angle can be cut somewhere in this area. If you fold your fabric, you'll see where a 45-degree angle is going to be, and just cut. There's an overlap here and an overlap here. Very simply, you're going to take that point and you're going to put it in between those two layers. And just sliding it in, just have that come in nice and flat. Now you're going to be able to continue sewing that 1/4 inch and go right over top of this first seam. Pin those two bindings together. When you turn it over, those seams are going to match up. You can hand stitch this little opening closed or use just a little bit of permanent fabric glue. I'm just going to put a couple of drops right along that edge, just enough to hold it. And before that glue dries, I can make sure that I have this seam lined up. When that one side is done, you can glue the second side. You only need a couple of drops because it is going to be stitched down after. We now are going to be able to roll those seams over to the front. Take that binding and press it right out to the edges. And I'm not worried about the corners. Flip those corners over and flip to the front. You will now be able to machine stitch this down. Your top thread should be the color of this flange. The bobbin is going to be the color of the back of the quilt. And you're going to stitch in the ditch all the way along that edge. To make it a lot easier, I like to pin it or clip it first. And that way, as I'm machine stitching, I don't have to worry about pinning and folding it. It will be easier if you pin it reverse to what you're going to sew. This is the right side of the quilt, so I'm going to start on the right and go up and around. I will be sewing it this way, but I'm going to be pinning it this way. And by pinning it in this direction, it's going to make those corners lie flat. The top piece needs to go over top of this bottom corner. When I get to that corner, I'm going to be able to pin it and match up that area. With it all pinned or clipped down, I now can just take this right to the machine and stitch right in that ditch. If you have an edged foot, you can use that. For my Bernina, I have a 10D edge foot. It has a little guide. That guide is going to run between those two seams and help guide you as you stitch. Your goal is to stitch right along that edge as close as you can, but staying onto this flange. By stitching right between those two layers, the flange stays loose, and yet the binding is still nice and tight. I was sewing in this direction, stopping here, and then going down. And by having that tuck in first, it makes it so I have bulk in one direction on one side, and the bulk from the binding going in the direction on the other side. And that way you don't have all of the bulk in one corner. And here is that area that we joined. I was just able to stitch right over top of it. So on the front, I have this beautiful binding with the flange, and in the back, I will have one row of stitching all the way around. So we have that nice little peekaboo flange. The binding has been done, and it's been all done by machine. So if you don't like hand sewing on your binding, this is definitely a nice option. Thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe, and as always, come on back. Let's see what we're sewing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.